someday. Exactly. No,
The technology part of it.
Okay.
Here we go.
I'm ready on my end. Are you ready on your
We're
end?
ready. We are
Okay,
recording.
we're all ready. Okay, so
Here we are.
take two, the August 2023 Sustainability Commission, Flagstaff Sustainability Commission meeting is now called to order. The first item on the agenda is the roll call. So once again, commissioners who are online, please unmute yourselves, and when it's when your name is called, please say aye or here. Chair Kevin White, I'm here. Commissioner Priscilla Boteng.
Here.
Commissioner Kristen Conkle. I don't think Commissioner Conkle is present, but she did inform us that she'd be late, so I expect she'll be around a little bit later. Commissioner Molly McCormick.
Here.
Commissioner Mary Ellen Metzger.
Here.
Commissioner Aku Kwarsi.
Here.
Commissioner, again, you'll please forgive me if I mispronounce this. Commissioner Amy Wolkowinski.
Very good. Here.
All right. We do have a quorum, and actually, once Commissioner Conkle joins us, I think we'll have everyone here. So that is a beautiful feeling.
Woohoo! Yeah.
All right. The next item on the agenda is the land acknowledgement. The Sustainability Commission humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by native descendants, border mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place is home. Next item on the agenda is public comment. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on any subject within the commission's jurisdiction that is not scheduled before the commission that day. Due to open meeting laws, the commission cannot discuss or act on items presented during this portion of the agenda. To address the commission on an item that is on the agenda, please, if you're online, use the Teams chat function. Simply type in public comment to indicate to the chair that you would like to comment, and you will be recognized. If you're in person, then just raise your hand, and likewise, you will be recognized. Do we have any public comment at this time? Right. Seeing none, we will move on. Next is the approval of the July minutes. And I know we have a few new commissioners here today, and I'm very, very happy to have you all here. And one of the things that we do at toward the beginning of every meeting is we approve the previous meeting's minutes just to make sure that everything in the minutes is accurate and that nothing important was missed. If you have a few minutes before each meeting to look over those minutes and just make sure that everything is to your satisfaction, then it's always appreciated. So that said, does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns about the July Commission meeting minutes? Okay, I have no concerns. I have no serious concerns either, except for one, which is more of a question to Nicole. So last meeting we did have some technical issues with a few different things. Is that an appropriate thing to put on the minutes? To include in the minutes?
Yeah, I don't think that there's a problem including that in the minutes.
Okay.
Fine, yeah.
Okay, it wasn't in last month's minutes, so I was wondering if that's something that we think is
So
important.
the minutes, and I don't think Stacy Fobar is still with us. Really, the minutes are to capture the high level discussion and any decisions or votes that have been made. But I know that it did interrupt a little bit of our business, so.
I did also see one little note about, Aku not being able to attend the whole thing, but still attempting.
That's okay. I missed that when I was looking it over, so thank you for catching that.
So I think in this context, that's inappropriate. But generally, if there's a meeting disruption with like city council, that wouldn't be included in our minutes.
Okay, thank you that's a big help. Thank you for.
But given that it interrupted some conversation and so far, that I think that is appropriate in this context.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. That's a very helpful clarification. So again, for the people who are new to this, our new commission members, we do generally proceed with these meetings roughly in accordance with Robert's rules, which is a widespread, fairly widespread sort of format for proceeding with meetings like these. So when something comes up that we want to vote on, then one of the commission members will need to make a motion to vote, and then another commission member will have to second it. If there's not a second, then the vote cannot go forward. We will then open the floor to any further discussion on that vote, and then after said discussion is concluded, we will vote. So, do we have a motion to approve the July 2023 meeting minutes as is?
I'll motion to approve them.
We have a motion from Commissioner McCormick. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second from Commissioner Metzger. Thank you both. Is there any discussion on the current item up for vote? All right, seeing none. Again, commission members who are online, please unmute yourselves. All in favor of approving the July 2023 meeting minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. All right, the motion passes and the July minutes are approved. Thank you all. All right, so next order of business is mostly basically just introductions. So we have several new commission members, and it's been a while since our commission has been at a full complement. And both for that and for the skills and knowledge that I'll be bringing to this commission. Speaking for myself, I'm very, very happy that you're all here, and I know that the Sustainability Division team members are very happy to have you on as well. That said, we did this last month, but since we really truly have everyone here this month, I thought it would be beneficial to go around the room. So welcome Commissioner Conkle, and let the record show that Commissioner Conkle is now here. Glad that you're with us. Glad that you're with us, and it's good to see you. Thank you.
You too.
All right, so we thought it'd be beneficial to go around the room and just have everyone introduce yourselves. Tell us a bit about your background, as much or as little as you're comfortable with, and especially and if you feel like talking about what you're excited about in terms of what you're excited about to be a part of this commission with, then we'll be happy to hear that as well. So as not to be too much of a hypocrite, I'll start, and then we'll go around the room clockwise. After Commissioner Conkle goes, we'll have Commissioner Botango, who's online, and then we'll continue clockwise down the table this way. So my name is Kevin White, and I am currently acting as chair of the Sustainability Commission, which has both been an honor and a lot of fun. I was born and raised here in Flagstaff, and it means a lot to me to be able to contribute to the community, and it's also been a really wonderful learning experience for me. I work at Lowell Observatory. I'm one of the public program supervisors, so I help run the programming over there. I have a master's degree in political science from Northern Arizona University, and I was also in Peace Corps in Ukraine for 3 years. So yeah, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you all. And again, we'll go clockwise around the room over this way.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy, and I have been living in Flagstaff for close to 30 years now. I came here for my undergrad and left a couple times for short stints, but have mostly been here, and I've been here since 2004 now. I also went to NAU, and I work in the environmental field. I'm an environmental scientist and a geologist, and I'm so excited to be here and to be on this commission to learn about the process, to learn about the best ways that we can engage our community in action and help to make Flagstaff a more sustainable place. And I'm also really interested specifically in making Flagstaff more walkable, transportation, recycling. I'm interested in all sustainability issues, but And I work for a company. I'm Director of External Relations for Crosswalk Labs, and we provide inventory greenhouse gas emissions data to cities, counties, states, et cetera. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Walkowinski. All right, Commissioner Kwarshi, it goes to you now.
Yeah. Hi everyone. So I'm Aku Kwashi. I did my master's at NAU and I graduated with a master's in climate science and solutions with an emphasis in greenhouse gas accounting. I have been in Flagstaff for 2 years now, so pretty new, but still learning and enjoying like everything that Flagstaff has to offer. And it's been great. And I was really excited to join the Sustainability Commission because like back home, I'm originally from Ghana. So back home, I used to like volunteer with like clubs and stuff to kind of support communities and help them like come up with like, if they're doing like a waste program or like beach cleanup or something I was really interested in doing, and having the chance to be part of a commission that basically or essentially looks out for the city residents and how best we can be more sustainable in our like everyday lives. It's a very exciting thing for me. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Tia, go ahead.
Hey everyone, I'm Tia. I have the privilege of meeting all of you by now. And let's see, I started with the Sustainability Office in May and moved here last July with my partner from Central Oregon in Bend. And I studied environmental sciences and nonprofit administration at University of Oregon, and love working in the kind of community-focused sphere of sustainability and environmental conservation.
I was in Klamath Falls right before I moved here. Are you
Really?
spending time there?
I've been through there.
Hi everyone, I'm Kristen Conkle. I've been on the commission for about 3.5 years, and I've been in Flagstaff for just over 5. I teach in the public health undergraduate program at NAU, and I'm particularly interested in sustainability as it relates to the intersection between public health and climate change and addressing issues with health equity.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Boateng. Commissioner, I think you're muted right now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you can. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am Priscilla Boateng. I've been in Flagstaff for 6 years now. I have a master's and a PhD from NAU, both in political science. And I joined the Sustainability Commission to be able to make a positive impact in the community. I love Flagstaff. I enjoy the mountains, the view, and also I love hiking.
Excellent. And before we move on, thank you, Commissioner Boateng. I believe we also have Councilmember Austin Aslan, who is our City Council liaison online as well. Councilmember Aslan, would you be willing to introduce yourself?
Hey there, yeah. Hi, everybody. Great to see a full docket of commissioners here. It's been a while. Nice to meet all of you. I've been on council for 5 years. Sustainability and climate adaptation and resiliency is one of my strong suits and one of my pet issues. I'm really proud to be the liaison for sustainability, working on all this stuff, and it's great to have a full docket of folks here. Looking forward to listening in on all these conversations.
All right, thank you very much, Councilmember Aslan. I believe we have a representative from the Forest Service here, which I'm extremely grateful for. You can introduce yourself or not as you feel like.
I'm happy to introduce myself. I am not on the commission, so.
I didn't bring snacks.
I did not bring snacks. I'm unaware of that policy, but next time.
To be clear, snacks are not a requirement.
I'll bring them next time anyway.
You're wearing a uniform, you gotta bring snacks.
Yeah, right. It goes without saying. Yeah, but I'm a silviculturist with the Forest Service. I'll talk a little bit more about what I do, I guess, during my talk. But yeah, I've been in Flagstaff for the better part of 25 years. I got a bachelor's in forestry from NAU, and I did spend some time up in Oregon. I got a master's in forest ecology and silviculture at Oregon State University. That's pretty much the only time I've been away from Flagstaff in the last 25 years. And I'm really excited to talk to you about some reforestation stuff here in a few minutes. So thanks for having me.
Thanks. All right, Commissioner McCormick.
Hi everyone, Molly McCormick. I am the program manager for the Southwest Fire Science Consortium, which is out of the School of Forestry. Before that, I worked at the U.S. Geological Survey here in town. I've been in town off and on for 24 years. And I'm so happy to have a bunch of people here. And I think it's great that people that are new to town and people who have been around a while, and it's nice to have diversity.
Thanks, Commissioner McCormick. All right, Nicole.
Hi, I'm here because I have to be.
Um,
And I also noticed my headshot, I'm wearing this dress, so that's really funny. Hi, I'm Nicole Antonopoulos. I have had the pleasure of being in this position since 2007. Oh my goodness. And I'm just really thrilled to see everyone at the table and really appreciate all of your time and contributing to the work that we're doing in the sustainability division. We recognize that you are taking time out of your personal life to help assist us, and it just speaks volumes of how you care for this community and just globally and everything that's going on. You all are likely familiar that we have a really aggressive carbon neutrality goal by 2030, and we need all the help we can get. So I'm just expressing my gratitude in advance for everything you do to help us work toward that goal. It's incredibly ambitious, and we need all the help we can get. I see as some of you are assisting us with our flood proofing grants and putting door hangers out, and that's just another extension of how amazing all of you are. And I'm really glad to see this table full again. It's been a while, so thank you.
All right, thanks, Nicole. All right, and
What if it'll help much for me to tell you I was a speech major in college? No, never mind. I'm a second generation native Arizonan. My family came to Arizona in 1920 from Prescott. And my first experience with the environment was as an undergraduate at Arizona State University. I took environmental science, but it was only elective. My second experience with the environment was I was a principal of a middle school in Glendale, and the Glendale Elementary District has an outcome and has had it since 1980 of all children being environmentally astute and environmentally aware. And my experience as a middle school principal was I had some students come to me to complain about the fact that we were using, they wanted me to get glass plates in the cafeteria because it would make a lot more sense to wash dishes. And I explained to them that in Arizona at that time, this was from my environmental class in 1973, water was more precious than landfills. And so it was better to throw things away than to wash them. I'm sorry about that now, but it was the great wisdom I had to pass on at that time. Just as a kind of full disclosure, I came to Flagstaff in 1994 as principal at Sonoa High School and was there for 3 years and bought a house, and then later on returned to it in 2014. So I've been back in Flagstaff since 2014 as a retired administrator.
cool. Thank you. Well, again, both commissioners, both new and returning. Again, it's both a pleasure and an honor to work with each of you. And again, just to echo Nicole's thoughts, it really is a big contribution to the community of Flagstaff. So thank you. All right. So next on the docket is Sustainability Division updates. And so Tia, the floor is yours.
Okay, quick question. Am I able to move this to the end of the agenda?
Yes.
Because
Yeah, I believe that's
Okay.
one of, I believe that's a privilege I have as chair.
Yes.
So by,
Let's do that.
so the Sustainability Division updates are moved to the end of the agenda.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tia. I appreciate that. Next up then is, again, forgive me if I mispronounced this. Is it Mark Nabel or Nabel?
Nabel, yeah.
Nabel, okay. Mark Nabel with the Forest Service, and again, I'm very, very happy to have you here. We really do appreciate it. I have So I understand you have a presentation for us, and I'll have, we will have some questions for you after that, I'm sure.
That sounds great. Well, thank you to Tia for letting me use her computer during my presentation. So rather than make her flip through my slides, I might just sit over here. If you guys are comfortable with that. All right. So yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Mark Nabel again, silviculturist with the Forest Service here on the Coconino. I've been in my current position for 8 years now, since 2015. Before that, I worked on the Kaibab. Before that, I worked on the Coconino. Before that, I worked on the Kaibab. So I've pretty much been on the Coconino or the Kaibab National Forest for most of my career. Short stint in Los Alamos, working for the National Lab there, doing forestry type work. But yeah, definitely I'm well invested in forest management here in Northern Arizona. So a lot of people ask what a silviculturist is, and then when I tell them the definition of silviculture, they gloss over. But because of the definition in this group, I'm going to tell you what it is, and maybe you won't gloss over quite as much. So silviculture is basically like the art and science of managing the forest to achieve multiple landowner objectives in a sustainable manner. And so sustainability is right there in the definition of what I do. So but when people gloss over, usually I just tell them I manage the trees, and they understand that a little bit more. So anything involving trees, cutting trees, planting trees, ensuring trees grow successfully is in my wheelhouse. Most of the time we talk about cutting trees, and that is the focus of a lot of our management here in Northern Arizona. As you might imagine, fields reduction projects, trying to improve the health of our forest and the vigor of trees is right up there, and that's what I spend most of my time on. But reforestation, particularly post-fire reforestation, is a growing part of my job. If you guys have ever showed up, it sounds like a lot of people have been in Flagstaff for a long time. A lot of people like to volunteer, so we've had big volunteer projects for planting in the past. If you would have come out for one of those days, you probably would have met my counterpart, former counterpart, Andy Stevenson, who was really passionate about reforestation. He ran our reforestation program up until he left for a position on the Kaibab. So a lot of back and forth between those two forests about a year ago. So I've inherited our reforestation program since he left. Getting up to speed, I've got some different ideas about how to run our reforestation program, and I'm definitely new to it, but very excited. I was more involved in reforestation actually when I worked in the Kaibab, and so a lot of these pictures you'll see on my slide are from the Kaibab when I was getting involved in reforestation work back in the early 2010s. So let's dive into it. Full disclosure, I understand post-fire stuff in Flagstaff is a sensitive topic. Yeah, we've had some big fires, not as big of fires as other forests have had throughout the Southwest, but the impact of the fires we've had has been huge for this community. I don't have to tell you guys that. And just as a Forest Service employee, I'll tell you, I take that very personally when fires burn out in the woods and cause the flooding that they've caused. And obviously we lost houses in the fires last year. And so, and I was that fire, the pipeline fire started in, well, the tunnel fire is actually the one that burned the houses, but the pipeline fire was huge. And that started very near one of my first projects I managed here on the Coconino. And so that was pretty heartbreaking for me to see that happen. I think that's, reforestation in a sense is it's a healing in a lot of ways, and I've had a lot of people approach us in the Timberline, Wapaki community when we've been out there working in that area, and they really want to get involved in reforestation efforts because they think it's an opportunity for them to heal too, because it's just such a tragedy to look at it every day in the forest behind their house, and an opportunity to go out and make the situation better and to put trees back on that landscape is something people get excited about. So. If I don't mention it again, I'll just say we plan to start replanting parts of the pipeline fire, actually parts that reburned, parts of the Schultz fire that reburned in the pipeline fire next summer. I start with 300 acres, and then we'll definitely be volunteer opportunities, and it seems like a good group to help spread the word about that. So I'll try to keep you guys in the loop when we have those volunteer days, and encourage you to help recruit folks to come out. So, all right, so I'll dive into the presentation part. I threw this together pretty quickly because we're in a full-on cone collection mode right now, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But I was climbing trees yesterday, collecting cones. evaluating them for maturity and bugginess issues. I'll be climbing trees tomorrow, and so it's exciting times. If you've noticed ponderosa pine around town, they are just chock full of pine cones. The best cone crop we've had in 11 years, but that is really eating my lunch at work right now, and excited about it. But it's something we
I have
can.
some in my house if you want to get some.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yep, there are boatloads. So we're gonna have a good year and collect a lot of seed that we're gonna need for future reforestation efforts. It all goes well over the next 3 to 4 weeks. So anyway, so I'm going to talk about what goes into how we decide where to do post fire revegetation efforts and kind of what some of those actions are that we consider doing after a fire. And then the rest of my presentation is really going to focus on reforestation. Obviously, revegetation can mean grasses, forbs, shrubs, but my primary focus is on the trees, but I'll at least touch briefly on other revegetation that happens after fires. I'll talk about how we kind of do an assessment to decide where we have reforestation needs, and in particular where we decide we need to take the step of planting trees versus just letting natural recovery happen after the fire. I'll talk a little bit about the formal process that we go through to plan where we're gonna plant, the NEPA process, which many folks are probably somewhat familiar with. And some of the NEPA we've done to clear acres for reforestation on the Flagstaff Ranger District specifically, which is the district I work in all around Flagstaff here. I'll talk a little bit about some of the reforestation efforts that we've been working on over the last 10 to 15 years. There's been reforestation efforts before that, but that's about the extent of when my time is here and when some of these bigger fires have happened around Flagstaff. And then we'll talk about future reforestation plans that we're working on. And then I'll talk about some of the factors that we consider for tree planting projects. So that's what I plan to touch on. You'll have to cut me off, Tia, if I go over 20 minutes. I want to leave times for Q&A, and it seems like we're running a little bit behind. So I'm very long-winded. I took Toastmasters for 7 years. I got better at public speaking, but the one place I always fell down was meeting the time limit. So I'm really excited when I talk about forestry. So cut me off if you need to. All right. So, and I apologize for the lack of pictures. Again, this was thrown together pretty quick. There'll be more pictures and some maps coming up. So how do we decide where post-fire vegetation management action is needed? And so there's really two parts of that process. The first part is a team gets assembled called a BEAR team, so Burned Area Emergency Response Team. Those teams get assembled really as the fire is still burning out on the landscape, and they're looking at what are we going to do after the fire to mitigate, impacts to infrastructure, stabilize the soils, and limit post-fire flooding, things like that. And so during that BEAR process, they look at a lot of things, but in terms of vegetation management, they're looking at, how do we stabilize the soil? Hell mulching is one of the approaches taken, where basically you're dropping straw out of a helicopter, trying to stabilize the soils that way, and then aerial seeding is another way we do post-fire vegetation. So basically dropping seed out of an airplane or a helicopter, and trying to get some vegetation back on the slopes post-fire that way. And so we've done that. Schultz Fire had a huge helimulching and aerial seeding effort. We got the funding for that. Some of the more recent fires, we haven't done as much of that, and part of that is A, it's expensive, and B, a lot of times you don't get the results that you're looking for, especially in a monsoon type. I mean, you guys know our fires happen typically May, June before monsoon season starts, and then we get monsoons and heavy rain almost immediately, and all that stuff that's sitting on the soil surface tends to wash away, including the seed, if it doesn't get eaten before it germinates. And so we get good vegetation response in our drainages where the water flows, but not so good of a response on some of the slopes. And so mixed results on those types of activities. They are very expensive. And we found out a lot of fires, if you go out to the pipeline or tunnel fire now, you'll see there's a lot of vegetation coming up on its own. And so a lot of our species here are fire adapted and able to maintain a seed bank that regerminates after a fire. And we get a lot of weedy species, but also the native species tend to reestablish as well. And so we tend to rely more on natural regeneration of like grasses and forbs and things like that. But we have those options in the toolbox if needed. Okay, so again, reforestation is my big thing. I manage the trees, not the grasses and the forbs. I'm going to spend more time talking about kind of what goes into planting project, and that starts really with a reforestation needs assessment. And we're really being pushed right now pretty heavily in the Forest Service to dial in our reforestation needs assessment and not just look at some of the recent fires where we typically focus a lot of our efforts, like we just had the pipeline tunnel fires last year, like what's our need on those fires, but we're actually being mandated to go back to old fires, old, timber harvests, and look kind of all encompassing at where we had trees at some point historically and we don't have trees now, and evaluate, is there a reforestation need there, and if there, how are you going to attack it? And a lot of that came out of the Replant Act that was just passed last year, which basically mandates you have to have a plan for reforestation in places that you've identified a need, and you're supposed to have a plan for how to address those needs within 10 years, and that's been going on for 3 years now. So by like 2030, we're supposed to. It doesn't mean we have to have all the reforestation work done, but we need to have a plan everywhere that we've identified a need. So we're spending a lot of time on that. We actually hired a position on our district to address reforestation specifically, and so this act came with a lot of money. It actually lifted a cap on the funding source for a lot of reforestation work. It's based on timber exports, a tariff on timber exports. There used to be a cap on how much of that would go towards reforestation. They basically lifted that cap now. And so where we used to have, I won't throw out the numbers, I don't know exactly what it is, but say like $20 million to work on reforestation, now it's like $200 million. And so they're basically telling us like, you've got all the labor, you've got all the people power you want, you've got all the funding to pay for seedlings, to pay for contractors to plant those seedlings. Like, money's not the object anymore. You've got the resources. So basically, don't give us any excuses if you can't pull this off. And so we hired a forester to focus specifically on identifying reforestation needs, come up with a plan for the next 7 years now that we're 3 years into the Replant Act, and address that backlog of needs. So. So reforestation needs assessment ongoing right now. We had a pretty good idea of where we wanted to plant before, but now we're getting a better idea as we go back through some of these older fires, including like the radio fire of 1977. So we're going to look at that fire and some fires that are older than that. So, we make determinations on reforestation needs based on a variety of different factors. Land suitability, if we go stick trees out on the landscape, are they actually going to take? Or is it places where timber grew historically, or is it an open grassland that may have burned as part of the fire, but was grassland historically, we want to put that back to grassland. Wilderness is a sensitive issue when it comes to management. So the Kachina Peaks wilderness, a lot of the pipeline fire burned through Kachina Peaks wilderness, San Francisco Peaks, and typically we don't do active management in wilderness, and you can't do any active management that involves machinery. So you can't drive vehicles in the wilderness, you can't use like a planting auger in the wilderness, and depending on what the mandate is for a particular wilderness, you might not even be able to plant trees, period. But typically we rely on more natural recovery in wilderness, and we focus on areas that are outside of designated wilderness for our replanting efforts. And then a final factor in the decision of whether to plant is whether those acres were historically in our timber base. And so there's certain acres that, grow trees fairly productively, and there's certain acres that don't grow trees as productively. In ponderosa pine type, as you transition into pinyon juniper, you tend to get like ponderosa pine stringers in some of the drainages, but most of the landscape is pinyon juniper, and the trees aren't growing very productively. There's not that many of them, and so some of those acres would not be considered part of our timber base. Anything in the wilderness is also not considered part of the timber base. Anything on very steep, inaccessible slopes would not be part of the timber base. But basically, if it's within the timber base, that's where we need to focus on replanting trees. And some of this comes out of the National Forest Management Act. Gosh, I don't know what year it was, but NIFMA. So that's always mandated that you have a plan for reestablishing trees when you lose them within your timber base, whether that's through harvest or some sort of disturbance, of which fire is the most common one. Okay, so options for addressing reforestation needs. One option is basically to count on natural regeneration happening on its own, and that's a tool that we use very frequently, because if you still have a seed source out there on the landscape, there's a good chance that it's going to regenerate on its own. For ponderosa pine, the rule of thumb is that if you have an existing seed source within about 200 feet to 200 meters, and sometimes up to a quarter mile, you're probably going to get some natural regeneration that's going to come in. And ponderosa pine is a fairly heavy seed. It does have a wing on it, like maple. So if you've seen the fluttering of seeds coming out of ponderosa pine, it's because it's got a little wing, and so it can disperse through wind a little ways away from a tree, but it's still a very heavy winged seed compared to, like, say, Engelmann spruce, which has an extremely light seed, and so it can fly much farther from the parent tree. But for ponderosa pine, most of the seed tends to fall near the parent tree, but can land, up to about 200 feet. And if it's a really windy day or the tree is upslope, you can get seed dispersal much farther than that, up to a quarter mile. But that's one of the first passes. Like if we have fire burn in an area, but we've got some survival out of the landscape or pockets, islands of surviving trees like we often have in fire, those are not areas we can focus on planting. We just allow those to regenerate naturally, and then we go evaluate them every 5 years or so to see if we're getting natural regeneration establishing in that area. If we don't think we're going to get natural regeneration on its own, we will then identify that as a planting need on the forest. Right now we've got about 10,000 acres worth of a planting need on the forest, and we might determine that there's more through our reforestation needs assessment that we're in the process of working on. But basically places that you don't think trees are going to come back. And then natural recovery is one. That's usually natural recovery is something that we identify in wilderness, so we don't have to go back every 5 years and see if it's regenerating on its own. Really, there's not much we could do if it wasn't, so we just classify those as natural recovery. We'll continue to monitor them, kind of passively, but not actively feel like we have to go in there every 5 years to see what's happening. A lot of times in the wilderness, like on the San Francisco peaks, a lot of aspen's going to come back. We know there's, more of that Engelmann spruce, corkbark fir, those species that tend to, seed flies farther. We expect we're going to get pretty good regeneration happening across a lot of howling bird in the San Francisco peaks. But even if it doesn't, kind of just leave it at be. So that's how that goes. All right, so reforestation needs assessment. I use the term here, ravage. So this is one way that we help determine where we've got a planting need or not, and this is really based on the severity of the fire and tree mortality specifically. So ravage, I should know the definition of ravage, but basically it's like rapid vegetation response after the fire, something along those lines. And so basically what these colors represent is percent of basal area lost, and basal area is just a fancy definition for like tree density. And so the 4 different colors on here represent like 0 to 25%, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, and 75+%. So all the red on here, this is the Schultz fire. We indicated we had 75+% basal area loss. So most of the trees out there on that part of the landscape are dead. Usually in the center of these red areas, everything's dead. And you guys probably saw that on the Schultz fire. This is Schultz Pass Road here. This is Timberline here. And we had a huge pocket in the middle where basically almost every tree died. And so we used that. That's basically it's based on satellites. I think that actually they fly it, I think, with airplanes, but it's like reflectivity of the tree canopies, and they can do that fairly quickly after a fire. In fact, I think within 60 days after the fire is contained, they have to have, on any fire that's over 500 acres, they have to do this ravage assessment, which starts to feed foresters and other land managers the information they need to decide what to do after fire. So another approach we take, this is the Horseshoe Fire up off of Highway 180 that burned in 1995, actually. This was one of the first big fires in the Flagstaff area. There was kind of a wake-up call for people that, big fires can happen. We hadn't seen a lot before the mid-90s. And so this was a fire that burned in 95. Some efforts were made to plant it shortly after the fire. Most of those efforts failed. If you go out there, drive Highway 180, you'll see a pretty big landscape with very few trees on it. And so we've done a cursory analysis using other tools, but then we've actually sent seasonal employees out there to do a pretty intensive plot-based system. Every a couple hundred feet, they're stopping and they're assessing, are there trees around on this landscape? What species are they? How tall are they? What's the density? And so basically these different colors circles represent how many trees or how many ponderosa pine trees are on that landscape. And if they're big green circles, it basically means it's regenerating on its own. There's probably not a planting need. If you see the little red circles, they're not picking up any trees on the landscape, and so that's an area we feel like we need to go plant. So if we're looking at this, you guys can see my pointer. Basically, this would be a planting need in here. This would be an area where we think we're just going to be able to certify that natural regeneration has occurred, and we walk away from that. So, all right, then the other cool, more modern tool for doing a reforestation needs assessment is LiDAR. So that's where you're flying over with airplanes and you're shooting laser beams at the landscape. And LiDAR is a very effective tool for picking up tree canopies, assessing tree heights. Depending on how you fly it and what the intensity of the laser beams flying out of the airplane are, you get up to 15, 20 points per square meter, and that's enough to pick up tree canopies on even smaller trees. And so some of these purple and blue colors are trees that survived the horseshoe fire, but all these tiny little red specks are areas that have natural regeneration after the fire. And so instead of sending seasonal employees out to do some of this assessment, there's no way you're going to pick up those small trees with just like native imagery or something like that, like aerial photography, like you might see if you're on Google Earth or Google Maps. You can't pick most of this up on that, but if you fly over with LiDAR, you can pick up all those individual trees, and you can start to make determinations of what the density is. As the trees grow, you can start to pick up the heights, and so this has really been a cool tool for doing the reforestation needs assessment remotely without having to send people out on the ground. So if I was looking at this, I'd say not a lot of regeneration coming in here, but most of this is regenerating on its own. Maybe there's pockets that aren't achieving the density that we might want, but it's a sign that this some of these areas that want to regenerate on their own, and so not areas we prioritize for planting. All right, so once we complete a reforestation needs assessment, whether that's on a specific fire or across a larger landscape, then we go through the planning process. If we want to undertake any action on federal land, you have to go through the NEPA process. So that can be very involved, or it can be more straightforward. It always involves the opportunity for public input. But in the case of reforestation projects, usually we're able to do that under what's called a categorical exclusion. So usually reforestation projects are pretty uncontroversial. Have the act of sticking trees on the ground usually has limited impact on the environment. It's more favorable for the environment to go do. It's different from cutting trees where you're running across the landscape, heavy machinery, disturbing wildlife. It's basically a bunch of people out running around with trees in a bag and sticking them in the ground. So we can get away with just doing, I'll say get away with, but we're allowed to just do a categorical exclusion, which leads to a decision memo where the forest supervisor will sign off that, yes, we're authorizing, this many acres of planting for a particular area, or, based on a fire or whatnot. So we've had two different CEs or decision memos related to reforestation in the last 15 years or 13 years on the Coconino, on the Flagstaff Ranger District. The first was after the Schultz Fire, which burned in 2010, west of Timberline, east of the Peaks, and that authorized up to 4,500 acres of planting across the Schultz Fire. And then we started, looking, all right, as we were wrapping up the Schultz Fire, the planting process there, we were looking at what other fires do we, have a need for? Some of those were more recent fires, like the Taylor Fire from 2010. There was the Pumpkin Fire from 2000 that reburned in the Boundary Fire. Looking at some of those and determining whether there's a reforestation need on that. So rather than attack each one of those fires individually, basically looked at the whole district simultaneously and identified the planting needs, and then put that out for public scoping. Very few comments. Everybody generally in support of planting trees, and that authorized up to 13,000 acres of planting across 10 fires. Some of these are very old. Like you can see, there's the White Horse Fire from 1951, Bell Fire 1967, Radio Fire was the one up on Mount in 1977. And there were a couple of old clear cuts, which is not a management approach that we take on Forest Service lands, especially in the Southwest anymore, but there are a couple of old clear cuts that we identified as having a planting need as well. So this one opened up about 13,000 acres of planting in Schultz Fire. CD opened up, excuse me, 40. I should have eaten that granola bar. Author has up to 4,500 acres of planting.
You get without sharing run.
Yeah, I should have split it 5 ways. All right. So I'll talk a little bit about post-fire reforestation efforts on the Schultz Fire. We planted 2,900 acres across the Schultz Fire. This is, again, Schultz Pass Road right here, planted on both sides of it. Mostly ponderosa pine, but when we got up on the slopes closer to the Waterline Road, which is now very visible when you're looking from Highway 89, but well, you guys probably know the Waterline, and folks that are involved in city activities or work for the city, that's a huge critical infrastructure because it provides a water source to the city of Flagstaff. But basically from the Waterline Road all the way down to the community of Timberline, we stuck trees in the ground, 2,900 acres between 2012 and 2019. I accidentally deleted my slide that shows all the other fires we planted, but I can tell you from all these fires, we planted the Hochtifer Fire, the Radio Fire, Taylor Fire, Horseshoe Fire, Bell Fire, we have planted the Pipe Fire, White Horse Fire, Pumpkin Fire. I don't think we planted the Trick Fire yet, or the Red Fire. We haven't planted these clear cuts, but basically out of that project that we completed the analysis for in 2018, we've done some planting across most of those fires and plan to continue to do more planting across those fires into the future. So this map here shows the location of a lot of those fires. And so, like I said, most of these fires now we've stuck some trees in the ground. And so we've done that historically, but over the next 5 to 10 years, these are also the areas that we plan to continue to plant. We've achieved some of our objectives on like the Hochtifer Fire and some of these other fires. We have a couple other smaller fires we're still looking to plant. And then really, as most of you know, the pipeline and tunnel fires reburned the Schultz Fire. And so that was very unfortunate. Most of the seedlings that we had out there were killed by those two fires. Pipeline burned a little bit hotter than the tunnel fire. Some of the seedlings survived in the tunnel, but pipeline, pretty much everything got wiped out. So we're looking to start an effort to reforest the Schultz Fire again. So we're considering this a replanting effort, which doesn't require new NEPA, at least for the areas that we already analyzed in the Schultz Fire. But we'll be looking at the rest of the pipeline and tunnel fires as well, in addition to the Raphael Fire was the other big one that we've had burned since we completed that NEPA in 2018. That was down here in the southwestern part of the district. Anybody who lives in the southwest corner of town probably remembers that one well because we were all on pre-evacuation alert, and it was pretty basic times. All right, so I'm definitely running up against my time. This is the last slide I really wanted to cover, and then I had some other fun slides, but we can skip over those in the interest of time and see if there's questions. So, what factors do we consider when we're, going out and planting trees? So, anytime you're doing a planting project, you got to get the seedlings and the people into the site. So accessibility is a big factor. How far is it from roads? How, inaccessible is the terrain? We can, transport seedlings and things with UTVs and ATVs, but if there's not a road close, that limits our ability to plant. Site limitations are a big thing. South-facing slopes, very hot, very dry. You can stick all the trees in the ground you want. There's a pretty good chance most of them are going to die. And so we look at topographic limitations a lot. We tend not to plant on south-facing slopes. We focus our efforts in, cooler and wetter areas, even microsites within a larger site. So if there's a drainage across a landscape that's a little bit drier, we might focus on planting in the drainages more than on the flats, things like that. Seed source, this is a fun one. We've heard climate change mentioned a few times, probably a focus of this group largely. So when we're identifying genetics that are going to be suitable for a piece of ground, historically we always just said, all right, if there's a tree growing on this landscape, we can collect from that tree and plant right here on this same piece of ground because the genetics for that tree are probably adapted to this piece of ground. And so when we go out and climb trees and collect cones, that was kind of the MO. But now with climate change and things being hotter and drier, we're actually looking at like assisted migration, where we might not necessarily moving species around so much, but moving genetics within a species. So maybe you collect ponderosa pine seed. If we're going to go replant the Schultz Fire at say like 8,000 feet elevation, maybe we'll collect seed from somewhere closer around Flagstaff at a little bit lower elevation and move the genetics from that seed up in elevation a little bit, with the idea that it's going to be a little bit warmer and drier, and that seed might be more adapted to a slightly higher elevation or higher latitude. And we're also moving things up in latitude, so maybe we should be collecting seed from the Prescott or the Tonto National Forest to plant on the Coconino National Forest, because they're a little hotter and drier too at lower latitudes, obviously lower elevation too. So looking at the seed source, making sure we're trying to match the best seed with the site that we're planting on. mechanism. So we do a lot of contract planting, bring folks in, 20-man crews, a lot of migrant worker crews. They knock out a project very quickly. That's been a great way to get large-scale planting done. Volunteer planting, though, especially, the community really likes to engage in planting efforts. So we do look for some of the more accessible areas to use volunteers instead of contractors and get the community engaged in that. Also agreements, so we partner with the state for planting projects. We're actually going to start planting next Monday with a group called Ecoculture, which is based out of NAU. It's kind of like a nonprofit spinoff, but run by a professor at NAU. So we do that, and they're actually partnering with Coho for Hopi, which is a group of Hopi individuals. They're largely involved in this Wood for Life project that some of you might have heard of, but they're also interested in reforestation. And so we'll partner with them for smaller projects as well. We're factoring in species mix. So if it's ponderosa pine, it's ponderosa pine. We do a lot of pure ponderosa pine plantings, but higher elevations when you get into more mixed conifer. We're looking at, all right, how much ponderosa pine do we want to mix with Douglas fir, white pine, things like that. So that's a factor we consider. Use of protection devices. So I love to hunt these guys, but they're not great for reforestation work. They love the aspen in particular, but they also will munch on ponderosa pine. So if we think there's going to be high browsing pressure from deer and elk, we use like these tree shelters to try to protect the seedlings, or Vexar tubing, something like that. That really increases the cost of the planting project. These things are a pain to carry around out in the woods. They cost like $3.50 a piece, which is way more than the cost of the seedling. But there's places where we know if you don't stick those on, the deer or elk will just come and pull the seedlings out of the ground as fast as you can put them in. So whether to use those, and then we really think about seedling density and spatial arrangement. So that's my last few slides. We're going to cover that, but I know we're limited on time, so I won't get into that. But basically, we used to go plant very dense, like this kind of condition here, and then we knew we would come back and thin that out later. There's row planting that was done, but now we're really looking at, do we really want to go plant 300 trees per acre and have to come back and thin out 200 of them because we only want 50 trees per acre on the landscape, in the long term. And so we're kind of adapting our planting approach to planting fewer trees per acre and also trying to mimic some of the spatial arrangements that would have been here historically, which is more of a groupy, clumpy type of condition. So, we might plant here and then leave this as like a natural grassy interspace. And then maybe over time it'll regenerate as these trees grow up. But just trying to kind of mimic the spatial patterns that were present in ponderosa pine before we disrupted the fire regime, and then ponderosa pine came in everywhere. So that's the gist of it. This is a good slide to talk about the last thing, which is if we go plant trees into a snag patch and all those trees fall over, which is exactly what happened on the Schultz fire, and then you get a reburn, which now we know pretty much, no surprise, like most of the acres that burn are going to reburn. And if you have heavy fuel loading from all the snags that fell over, it burns hot. It carries fire well, like the tunnel fire and pipeline fire were carried just fine after the Schultz fire, even though there were very few standing live trees. You're going to kill most of your regeneration. And so dealing with this coarse woody debris is pretty important. And a lot of times, salvage logging is a dirty word in the forestry world, especially amongst the environmental community. We don't do a lot of salvage logging. Ponderosa pine loses a lot of its value and productivity very soon after it burns. But the idea is get something like this. Maybe you either actively manage fire, you do a prescribed burn, some way of consuming a lot of that coarse woody debris, so that we've got a cleaner landscape to go stick seedlings on. If you have a fire that burns through, it'd be more likely to survive the second fire. So we're actually looking at going back and after reburns versus that initial fire when you get all this coarse woody debris to contend with. So I'm going to stop there because I'm definitely over on my time. But thanks for listening. And
Thank you.
Yeah, that was, I learned a lot. I have several questions, but I wanted to make sure that all the other commission members had opportunity to ask questions first.
What kind of education or outreach do you provide for folks that have forest burned on private property to do replanting?
Yeah, so we have a state and private forestry group out of the Forest Service, and we work closely, and we fund the state actually, out of federal funding to do a lot of that type of outreach for us. So, certainly when we do these planting projects, we have folks come out and volunteer. We will communicate with them on, what we feel like they could do on their private land. We definitely have people, we're the resource around here as far as people are concerned, so they'll call the Forest Service and I'll get a phone call from a member of the public and they'll say, trees die or bark beetle or whatever, or, not so much fire burning across their property, although, obviously the tunnel fire did do that. And so, yeah, we'll be happy to answer their questions, but really the state more actively engages with private landowners on how to manage their land.
Nicole?
Well, you definitely addressed it regarding the replanting and climate change. And so I'm just wondering what the methodology is at the Forest Service. Is that more regional, forest by forest? And where I'm going is we've done climate projections as part of our carbon neutrality plan. We've worked with CLEMAS out of U of A to build those projections for Coconino County using historic data. But one thing that I realize in this work that we're doing is the variation in climate models is not incredibly problematic. And I don't know if you have perspective on this from my work, but it is problematic from the political space. And it would be so incredible if we were all using the same model for Coconino County, for example. I know that there's jurisdictional issues, and this is like my Muppet vision for the world to utilize data. But yeah, so I was just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, because we talk a lot about the work that our recommendations that are built into the carbon neutrality plan are all based on this Coconino County projections model, and that's a pretty heavy lift.
Yeah.
And it would be really nice to know that that model syncs up with the work that you're doing, and then of course how that influences decisions that are being made in the space of like revegetation and so forth. That's a loaded question.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a little scary to try to answer that. But I mean, I will say, as a silviculturist, and I'll just speak from my knowledge as a silviculturist. I mean, obviously there's a lot of different climate change models. Some are more dire, some are way less dire. Yeah. I mean, they're all pretty dire. But how I use those climate change models is, there are, future, like here's what, forests are going to look like in 100 years under this climate change model versus a different climate change model. And a lot of the climate change models show ponderosa pine not being very abundant in northern Arizona anymore under the most extreme scenarios, or more isolated, wetter refugia and then pinyon juniper moving up slope, or a lot of these forests turning into more grassland, and then pretty much everything moving up in elevation, up in latitude. So we might lose spruce fir off the top of the peaks because it's runs out of ground. You can't go any higher than what it is now, and I know like on Mount Graham that's an issue for sure too. And so I don't. In my position, I don't have to subscribe to like one climate change model over another. I have to think about, climate change in the context of, and usually after a disturbance. So we just had a disturbance. In a way, it's like a clean slate. And so, it's appropriate to put ponderosa pine back where ponderosa pine was before. And under today's climate, generally it is. But I think about 50 to 100 years down the road, and that's one of the things, where I said, like, we don't plant south-facing slopes so much because they're only going to get warmer and drier. They're almost, they're too warm and dry right now. But in terms of like, system migration, which would be like, we've got ponderosa pine here now, and we're going to move pinyon and juniper upslope, and we're going to move ponderosa pine into a place that's more mixed conifer. We're not doing too much of that now. In fact, we can't until we get buy-in from key people like our regional geneticist. He has to subscribe to that, and they're not really pushing for that, but they are really pushing for, more of the genes, like genes from a lower elevation, and incorporating those, maybe not wholeheartedly, but maybe you take some seed from a lower elevation and some seed from the current elevation, and you kind of mix those together and grow seedlings and kind of plant all of that on a landscape. So really getting, maximum variability in the genetics on a particular site might make those trees the best adapted, and then their offspring, through natural selection and things like that, better adapted to that site over the long term. But yeah, I've seen all the climate change models, and but like I said, I don't have to subscribe to one or the other, but I think it is important that we kind of all get on the same page.
Gotcha, thank you.
I have a question about the healthiness of the forests.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have anything to do with planting trees so much as it has to do with thinning. And I realize you're a tree planter, but what's your perspective right now about what's going on? Because the newspapers, for years were talking about, oh my gosh, we're trying to get people to come out and sit in the forest. We have all these places, and I live in an area, I live right next to forest land, and walk out and see these big orange stripes and things, and,
Yeah.
okay, is that a tree they're gonna cut down? Is that a tree they're gonna save? I mean,
Yeah.
so what's your perspective on that? Do you think we are taking good steps towards creating a more healthy forest, or are we still lockjam, sorry to butt, with finding people to do the work?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'd say where we complete any project, we're definitely moving the forest in the right direction, for sure. But yeah, like you said, there's a logjam, so we should be treating, 30 to 50,000 acres a year, we're treating like, 5 to 10. Of course, 5 to 10 is better than, 2 to 5 or whatever we were doing 10 or 15 years ago. So even though, some of these big contracts we tried to implement haven't panned out, like Fort Fry Phase 1, and we haven't really gotten a mill here that's taken huge amounts of wood. We do have way more loggers working in this area than we did historically, and when we can get in, and that is my main focus is on thinning projects, not reforestation.
Right.
So, and I write the prescriptions
Oh,
for how those
so you aren't just a tree
should be
planter.
marked. Oh, no, yeah, for sure. I'm thinning, in fact, I get, there's not, we have a lot of buy-in for our thinning program, not so much buy-in for our reforestation program. So everybody's like, why are you planting trees when we need to be
Well, I
focused
believe
on
in
cutting
planting.
trees?
But as we all experience, you drive down the road and you see all these trees that have been devastated with bark beetles, and you think, oh my gosh, why aren't they thinning those out? Take care of the trees that are gonna cause a hotter fire, a worse fire.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing you say that we're doing better, that this money that we're talking about from the federal government hasn't really opened doors regarding creating a healthier forest.
Yeah, it's opening the doors slowly. And, but yeah, when we do a thinning project, we're definitely bringing the densities down. Spatial patterns, those individual trees are a lot more vigorous, able to withstand things like bark beetle attacks, able to withstand, fire, because we've got that dense stand
I've
condition.
had trees cut down in my own yard just to protect them against the bark beetle.
Yeah.
So here's my other question.
Yeah.
What does the orange stripe mean? Is it
Yeah.
it's gonna be cut down? Or
No,
is it
the orange stripe
gonna
means they're
stay?
gonna stay, and we need to do
Okay.
a better education effort. I'm talking to my wife
Because you
about
walk in the
that.
door and you go, is this what you wanna go over and hug it? Are we gonna give you?
Yeah, no, orange means stay. If you see blue, that means cut, but we don't do both in the same acre. Generally, we do leaf tree mark, and that's because we're cutting more trees
Okay.
than we're leaving. And so economically, it makes more sense to paint the ones you're leaving. Plus, if you're a marker, it's easier to visualize
Yeah.
what the residual stand's gonna look like if you're marking the trees that you want left versus the ones to cut. So I guess orange means leave. We also use the horizontal bands to represent boundaries,
Oh,
which
okay.
also means that those trees stay, but the diagonal slash means they stay and everything else will go in that situation.
So all the orange stripes are gonna stay, but all the ones that don't have anything on them are probably gonna go.
That's correct.
So if we see a tree we really like, we go get a big piece.
It's happened before.
I'm sure it has.
Well, I'll be honest with you, if we see the public doing that, it's in somebody's backyard, usually we just go back with our tracer paint, like our special foresters paint, we paint an orange stripe over it, because if it's really that important to somebody.
Oh, that's good,
we're
so it
happy to
does save
leave
the
it.
tree.
Yeah. Especially if it's right in
Is
somebody's
there some out there
backyard.
that are just, oh, I hate the thought of that one going.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. You said you had a bunch of questions.
I have a few. Anyone else before I get to mine? All right, so yeah, I have a few questions, and again, thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
So just to be clear, in terms of volunteer work, that is only something that you really do once you start planting. There's no like pre-planting or preparation for planting work in previous seasons or previous years that can be done with volunteers.
Yeah, we haven't, if people want to volunteer to do reforestation type stuff, I mentioned Friends of Northern Arizona Forests, which is a volunteer group, FONAF, mostly retirees, but they get really involved in a lot of aspen work around the district. In terms of, and so yeah, there is a resource for folks that just want to volunteer and be involved in reforestation. People love aspen more than they love pine anyway. So for Friends of Northern Arizona Forests, a great volunteer group, mostly retirees. Once in a while there'll be a family that'll come out and work with them, but they're a great group in town.
I have to get in touch with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of volunteer work for some of like the reforestation needs assessments and things like that, I think there is an opportunity there. It can be very hard to train up a volunteer and get good work out of them in a matter of like a day. I mean, some of this stuff is pretty simple, but some of it's a little bit more complex, and it's like the time it takes to train somebody up, you could have paid somebody to do it, or really, I mean, we have a lot of partner organizations too, and so we'll work with like Arizona Conservation Corps or American Conservation Experience, and we'll get, a group of like 8 kids that are young adults, who have some background, and they've got a crew leader, so I don't have to go like run that group, the whole time they're out there. And so we do partner more with folks like that than just like seeking volunteers, like show up on a Saturday. That's where planting projects are great, because you teach somebody how to plant trees in 20 minutes, and most of the planting's getting done by a contractor who knows what they're doing. So if you go, the volunteers don't really know how to plant trees, and a lot of them die. Everybody still feels good at the end of the day that they did something, and we'll come back and replant those areas if we have to. But
Just give me some orange paint, that's all I want.
So, yeah, but, we're gonna be planting every summer. We have been planting pretty much every summer, and we will continue to plant every summer. And so that's really the best opportunity to volunteer. But if somebody comes to me and says they want to volunteer, we'll find something for them to do, but not looking for big groups, because a lot of times it might end up being more of a headache, depending on the type of work you're having them do. If you're just people off the street, so.
Okay, thank you. That's informative. And I was gonna, well, I'll ask that later. In terms of other resources that the community could potentially contribute, are there any, in terms of, in terms of materials, stuff like compost, anything like that?
Yeah, I think, as I was sitting here, I was like, I'm gonna ask a question like what you just asked. And, we use mulch on some of our plantings, especially like the aspen planting project that we did a couple of years ago. We mulched those. We actually chipped the trees ourselves and used the mulch from our own trees. I think there is an opportunity there. The science definitely shows, especially in our hot, dry conditions, that if you can pull a little bit of mulch over the top, holding some more of that moisture, that can be effective. And so, yeah, I do think, obviously the city's got a lot of work going on, collecting a lot of woody debris from residents. I think there is something there that partnership could be formed. And, especially on the volunteer days when we've got people and they're close to roads, carry out a bucket of mulch, like in a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket or something like that, and having that provided by the city could be an opportunity for sure. I think just a lot of the outreach on, when we have opportunities for planting projects, and just, and we're always looking, we've got general buy-in for reforestation, more so from the public, I think, than from some of our own staff, who, again, I think we should be focused more on thinning of trees. But, I think when the time comes and we got planting projects, any sort of positive spin the city can help put on what we're doing, and, some communication. We've got our own public affairs folks that put out press releases and are available. But I think if the community could rally around some of these planting projects a little bit more, and you guys could help with some of that positive outreach, I'd be happy to, whatever, go out and do an interview or on site or something like that. And it could be, put up on the city's website or something like that.
Okay.
Things I'm thinking about. But really, funding is not a limiting factor. Like I said, there is all the funding we want. Otherwise, like FWPD was a great, city-funded project to go do some thinning, and we got a lot of good work done for that $10 million. But for reforestation, I wouldn't want the people of Flagstaff to have to put up any money, because we've got all we need.
Okay, that's all good to know. Next question. I know we're running out of time, but I'll make time if you will. So this is a multi-part question. Can you speak at all to problems, to challenges posed by topsoil loss? Are there any, is there any plans or techniques, or do there need to be any plans or techniques to like sort of do topsoil restoration in areas where we've lost a lot of topsoil due to flooding? And I guess the other part of that question, do you, as part of like, you do, part of the impetus for tree thinning, my understanding is to, reduce the amount of fuel for fires. Are there any sort of preemptive plans to sort of reduce the potential for topsoil loss before fires happen in different areas of forest?
Yeah, I think thinning and burning are two really effective tools for trying to keep fires from burning as hot as they do, the ones that just consume everything and leave the ground very scared. So I think, but that's your best approach for limiting topsoil losses to keep that big, high severity fire from happening. Once the topsoil's gone and soil scientists tell you it's gone, it'll reform in geologic time. So I think, after fire, that's where, mulching and things like that can come in. You can like contour fell trees to try to hold some of that stable on the slope, the soil on the slope versus having to wash into the drainages. But there's only so much you can do after a fire and before a fire, really, like I said. I mean, burning, burning that litter layer and getting the grass that's reestablished and then thinning out the trees to avoid that big fire, in my mind, are the most critical things you can do. In terms of like soil amendments and things like that, we are biochars. It's something that gets thrown around a lot. We've had it, we've been approached by NAU about incorporating biochar into planting projects. It's fertilizer and it comes from basically burning woody debris, and I think we'll look more into doing that in areas where we're actually planting trees. Broadcast biochar and things like that are kind of beyond my purview, and the research is there and the tools are there and the money's there. I think it's something that can be looked at. So
Maybe another thing the community could help with.
yeah, for sure.
So last question I think from me is, if I wanted to like, and again, this wouldn't be just up to me, it'd be up to the commission, but if I wanted to sort of try to initiate some sustainability commission coordination with the Forest Service in terms of organizing volunteers or organizing, again, mulch or compost or other things like that. Is there a contact that I can have to do that? Is that something I go to you about, or should I go to someone else?
Yeah, you can always start with me. My contact information's up there. We do have a volunteer coordinator. His name's Matt Summer, and he works out of the office across from the mall. Matt Summer, SOMMER, and I don't have I have his cell number, but
SOMMER?
SOMMER.
Cool.
And so you can do an employee search for him, but I'd be happy to share his contact info with you too. But yeah, generally when somebody just walks in the door and says they want to volunteer, that's the person that's going to respond, and he definitely organizes bigger group volunteer activities too. And I think he'd be really interested in partnering with
Okay. Yeah.
Bigger projects.
Cool. I might reach out to both of you then if it's okay.
Absolutely.
So again, thank you for being here. This is very informative, and it means a lot to have you here. It's I really hope that we can this is an important thing for the city of Flagstaff, has getting a lot of these areas. Actually, sorry, I lied. I do have one more question. You mentioned earlier that it was difficult to reforest wilderness because of the lack of machinery. I wonder if that might also be a no pun intended, fertile pathway for volunteering, at least among people who don't mind going on longer walks or longer hikes or whatnot.
Yeah, I think there definitely, even outside of wilderness, there's less accessible areas. Like I said, typically we lean towards contractors for that, but yeah, if we could get a group of really hardy people that don't mind strapping, 50 seedlings on a pouch and hiking them up a slope, I think there could be opportunities. Yeah, wilderness it's tricky, and one of the things we need to do, because obviously the pipeline fire burned huge portions of the wilderness, whereas the Schultz fire burned above the waterline road, but a lot of that's coming back to Aspen. I think we still need to do a reforestation needs assessment. Again, it's a little more informal within the wilderness because we don't absolutely have to do it, but we're all in the community. We're invested in seeing the peaks recover after the fire, and so I do plan to, and ERI is actually doing some of this right now, but Ecological Restoration Institute, but we do plan to monitor what's going on. If we do identify a significant area that we don't think is going to recover on its own, I'll be pushing to try to do some reforestation within the wilderness boundary, and if that comes to fruition, there could be an opportunity to get some help with some planting projects. So, and if I felt like I needed an advocate for doing some work in the wilderness, I think this could be a good group to help advocate for that. So if it comes down to that, I'll definitely reach out. And maybe even some help doing the reforestation needs assessment in the wilderness could be a possibility. I think, that could be something where if we got, 5 to 10 hardy volunteers that say, yeah, I'll go hike up, the south side of the peaks into the fire and throw in some plots and help evaluate things. I think there could be an opportunity there to engage some folks
Excellent.
too, because that's, it'd be hard to get Forest Service. community to do that.
I know I said I almost had a question, it turns out I'm not. Do we, and this is maybe something that is just impossible to answer, but do you have any estimated timeline as to the rate at which reforestation in these areas will reduce flooding in Flagstaff?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's not the reforestation that's gonna reduce the flooding, it's, everything else, reestablishing and kind of breaking down those hydrophobic soils. So it's the grasses and the forbs and the shrubs that come back in, and typically, I mean, we've already seen it this monsoon season to some extent. Like, we haven't had the level of flooding just after a year of, we haven't had the huge deluge storms that we had, last year too, but it's that grass that comes back in that helps stabilize that slope, and trees longer term can help stabilize the slope. And by the time they're doing any good, it's going to be 50 years post fire, and the grass will have already done most of that stabilization. But anytime you get roots in the ground, they're helping to stabilize, and the trees help with that for sure.
All right, cool. Well, now I'm done. So again, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And
You have a question?
Yeah, I do.
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, because you did such a good job of responding to all of the questions that I had.
Sure.
Yeah. Except for maybe one, it wasn't really clear as to what the objectives are with replanting, because you said there's even controversy within the forest. So I'm just curious if you could just state, like, what is it that you are trying to accomplish by replanting?
Yeah, I mean, so part of the, I would say, controversy, well, one of the controversies is sticking these things in the ground everywhere, so I'm pointing at these tree shelters, because a lot of these wind up blowing off the trees. Highway 180, they're all stacked up against the right-of-way fence, and they're an eyesore for sure. And then range, the tines that stick in the ground can maim wildlife if you pull the shelter out and the tines don't come out, which does happen on occasion, and we're a lot more conscientious about that now. After rangers and wildlife enthusiasts have said, man, if you leave these things in the ground sticking a half inch out, that's not good, which intuitively makes sense, but something we hadn't really pieced together in our brains on some of the first planting projects. So that's some of the controversy. But also, early cereal conditions, like open grassland type conditions, people will argue, and I don't disagree with this completely. Like, this kind of open condition is not as common on the landscape as it would have been, when we have ponderosa pine at a much lower density. You've got a lot of grasses, a lot of our ponderosa pine is very dense, mostly covered in litter, not a lot of grasses. And so, when we get this kind of condition created by fire, maybe we should leave it. And the argument I make on the flip side of that is this is still going to be an open grassland for the next 50 to 100 years. And if we do all the thinning that we say we're going to do, we're going to be creating more kind of open grassland type conditions as this is reforesting. And so, and so, certainly soil stability, creating, putting trees back in the ground for all the aesthetic value. The timber value is not what drives management here, but getting timber back on the landscape, to have that be, a commodity, it's somewhat important. But then, wildlife objectives, obviously you've got wildlife habitat that's burning up. We've, say it used to be the timber harvest was the biggest impact on the Mexican spotted owl, and now it's, stand replacing fire is a much bigger impact on Mexican spotted owl habitat. And so, over the long term, trying to create conditions in areas that burn hot, restore that wildlife habitat that was lost in these fires is another management objective as well. So really, I mean, you can look at every resource and say there's some benefit to sticking trees back in the ground if you do it tactfully. And we know we're not going to do it everywhere. So I don't know if that.
So many questions, just thinking about the forest, it's huge. These burn areas are different sizes, and I can see some reasons why you might want to have a little bit of a planting somewhere and not, but at the forest scale, I'm just not convinced. But I'm new to fire and everything, and I just haven't even read the science. I'm just
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, the argument I make to that too is we're gonna have more fires. Like that open condition you get, there's gonna continue to be open forest. And every time we go do a thinning project, if you say we're overcutting, and a lot of people say we're overcutting, it's like we're also creating a much more open condition. And so a lot of the grassland type of conditions on the landscape we're getting when we go thin out the forest to 50 trees per acre to some extent. But yeah, I mean, if we could just stop in time right now, and we've got 10,000 acres of really open grassland type conditions, and we could sustain that over time, and we knew we wouldn't have any more fires to create more open grassland conditions, I can definitely see saying, all right, let's stop, and let's just let this, recover on its own or be a grassland in perpetuity. But, we know there's going to be more. That mosaic might shift over time on where those, conditions from standard replacing fire are, but there's always going to be another fire. And so, and like I said, this is going to be a grassland still for 50 plus years when we go stick trees in the ground. And we're planting them way more open conditions. We're not sticking 300 trees per acre in the ground. We're sticking like 100 trees per acre in the ground in hopes that 50 of them survive, which would be more in line with an open ponderosa pine condition that existed historically. We're not trying to have every square foot occupied by trees. So, which you can kind of see in this picture. It's going to be pretty open still, especially if half those trees die, which we know they will.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing because no one has a crystal ball, and you don't know like how big the next fire is going to be, and if resilience is putting some trees in the ground or not. So yeah, I mean, you just act the best you can, and if the policy is telling you need to replant, well then that's what you do, following these best practices of climate smart informed decisions. So yeah, it sounds like you're doing the best you can.
Yep, and we do. We're mandated. That doesn't go anywhere with any of our resource specialists or even our line officers, our district rangers are like, they're telling us we have to plant. Like, I don't care if it doesn't feel right, we're not going to do it. But to me, it feels right. And I think if we do it tactfully and we do engage the public and we engage all of our resource specialists and pick the right spots that at least the majority of folks can get on board with, I think we'll be better off. So definitely not going to plant every acre.
Do ponderosa pines absorb carbon?
Oh yeah, for sure.
There's the answer for me.
Yeah.
Grasses though arguably absorb more carbon. So
I would not want to get into a carbon debate.
All right, so this has been super helpful. It has been worth every single minute, but we are already going to have to kind of speed run the rest of the meeting.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. This
you.
this conversation has
Thank you.
really profound has a really profound impact on the whole community of Flagstaff. So again, thank you for being here. You'll hear more from me, and I hope we can coordinate in some way or another.
Okay, that sounds great. Looking forward to it.
And definitely let us know. We can help push volunteer events and.
Yeah, I will definitely take you up on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, those days, we get 100 people out there.
She can help.
Say yes to have
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to stick around, but you guys.
You're welcome to if you like.
You probably have snacks to go eat, don't you?
I do. It's gonna be an early morning, so actually I think I'll take off. But yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. So again, we are going to.
Oh, wait, your jump drive.
Wonderful.
All right, so again, we are going to have to speed run the rest of the meeting a little bit. This was, again, this was worth every minute. That was a very important conversation to have. So next up on the agenda is is a sort of overview and brief discussion of neighborhood sustainability grants, and we're rapidly approaching that season. So Tia, I will let you take the lead on this one, and I will chime in as needed.
Thank you. Yeah, I think maybe just over a week ago, I finally was able to send you all the updated guidelines and application materials. And I noted that I sent it out to the staff to make some additional changes in addition to the changes that the subcommittee had also submitted. So I just wanted to go through those with you all and highlight them and open it up for any questions. And for the new commissioners, of course, this is your first time seeing all of these materials. So yeah, go through that. I put some sticky notes. I'm certainly not gonna read all of this. I'm just going to the points of highlighting. Let's see. Adjusted that grants can be awarded to those who have received other city awards. An example is the community action teams of Flagstaff have received both the beautification and action awards, other city funding, as well as the neighborhood sustainability grant. That's just one example. So we took that out of there to be consistent. And I think it's totally fine to have an organization receive funding from the city and other
And we don't always know. That's the other piece too, like,
I have a quick question. We also last time talked about how grants will not be awarded to agencies that received a grant the last award cycle.
Yes, that is up above mostly, so I just
Okay.
didn't reiterate it, but it is in number 2.
Okay, great.
But also, like, if you think we should reiterate, I can update it. And then I also took out the specific guidelines around 501c3s. This came up because I noticed that the Flagstaff Disc Golf Club was a 501c4, and they received, grant funds last year. So I just decided to take that out and keep, the not-for-profit organizations in there. And there wasn't any issues on like the city eligibility end of things for that language, so, yeah. Okay. I just wanted to highlight that this is the first year awardees will be doing, didn't word that well, complete a new final presentation format. Does this include kind of the language you were talking about, Commissioner Conkle?
I think so.
Okay. Any other, so yeah, previously, and we will still do like hear the final presentations in like the previously existing format in probably February of 2024 from like last year's grant awardees. And so that will be the same format where I believe they come in person and do like a 5 to 10 minute presentation about, their grant outcomes. And I've heard it's an excellent event. I haven't been to one. But we wanted to restructure that. So there was a subcommittee last year working on that. And so we'll need to nail out some more details maybe, but we do have time for that. It won't be until the spring of 2025, just with how the timeline works, which is crazy. Just highlighting that the new scoring rubric is linked in here. It's also linked on the website. So, I added this front title and did tiny little formatting things on the scoring rubric that the subcommittee made. I will highlight this in the guidelines as well, but I added a little bit more to the carbon neutrality scoring portion because, we wanted to bring up the carbon neutrality plan, but a lot of the question and the scoring rubric was focused on the emissions portion. And, after speaking with our climate folks, they wanted us to include the fact that it's not all about emissions in our carbon neutrality plan. It's also about resilience and adaptation and equity. So I included that throughout the scoring rubric and included it in the question. All right, and then I sent all of the category objectives to the team leads, quote unquote, to review, just because they have a really good understanding of the community gaps, because they work in it every day. And so they helped revise some of the objectives, kept it to the, same number of 3, and, kept in mind that we want to have a minimum of 2 of these objectives, but definitely something for everyone to review since some of them are revised, not all of them, but I know the food system, for example, Kaylee Wells helped revise that and update it. And then they also put some new project ideas in that they thought would be worth sharing with applicants. Any questions on those updates?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So we had previously had educate be in each of the category specific objectives with the that phrasing, like educate about this.
Mhm.
Just looking at that first one, I noticed that that is gone from the food objectives.
Mhm.
I think it'd be worth having a conversation about maybe moving educate to an overall project goal. Like I think that needs to be an objective or a goal for,
Yeah, and like, because I think education absolutely falls under foster a vibrant, sustainable, equitable food system as well. And I think we could just add that in there, foster and or educate about, word it in such a way that we incorporate educate into at least one of these to, fit those guidelines. Again.
I mean, I think, I don't know, having two objectives be thrown into one objective gets really tricky because then are people supposed to do both?
Well, yeah.
So we're suggesting that we
Fostering
need a
feels
a
really
additional
big and
objective that
overarching, so.
reflects education, a separate objective.
Yeah.
She doesn't want it folded in, she wants a separate one that says education, this could be an objective.
Oh, so a fourth one?
I don't know if we need it to be consistent to have 3 for each category, but I don't think we should remove educate out of the objective list for any of the categories.
Yeah.
I come from like a health education background, so that might be my bias, and if other people want to say it's fine. I also don't think, like most people,
Sounds good.
a lot of people might read foster a vibrant, equitable food system, and educate might not come to mind as a part of that definition.
Yeah, I totally think that sounds great, and I think we can update that very easily, and that's just like context that I, didn't have, because it's not written elsewhere, like necessarily, that's explicit, yeah.
And I think if we pulled educate to be an overall goal, I also think that would be fine, but then we would need to replace the educate objectives in the categories so that each category has 3 like options.
Yeah, I think we need all the categories to have the same number because that factors into how the rubric says to score them.
We could hypothetically also update the rubric. My concern about having another overarching goal is I feel like it can get kind of confusing to have so many goals that we're asking them to try to achieve with their projects. And I think it just might be easier, at least for this year, to incorporate it back in and just make sure that that wording is back in and.
You could put under one of the projects an educational setting too.
Yeah.
That might give, at least it gives this the message of education as being a part of what it's all about. Like a school-centered environmental greenhouse, something like that. School-centered greenhouse might work. Just to have that in, that's part of what education is.
Sure.
I think that's a good idea, but if it's gonna be like an actual objective, then it should be spelled out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just, because the projects are suggestions, right?
Well, I was just saying that if you're thinking that foster a vibrant is the same as educating, then you have an example that says there's an educational thing, that's not going to. If that's your perspective, I think we could do that.
I guess.
Is it set up right now so that there are the 3 objectives in each category? I looked at them earlier, but I wasn't looking for alignment like that.
In the next category, there was a word educate in the first objective.
It does say educate.
Educate and promote proper. So why don't
So
you
maybe we
have
just replace
educate
that.
and foster a vibrant?
Yeah.
Just put educate in that first sentence.
But educate a food system doesn't make sense.
No, educate and foster a vibrant, sustainable, and equitable food system.
Right, you can't educate a food system.
Now you're educating about the system.
Educate about,
Foster a vibrant.
About.
or foster.
Yeah.
How about like the overarching, I like the idea, Commissioner Conkle, I think you mentioned that, about making it just an overall goal of all of the projects, to educate community members.
And if we did that, we would have to replace the individual objectives that are about education with another option
yeah,
for a
so-
third objective.
I think we can navigate it just in that first bullet of educate about and foster.
Yes, I
Yeah,
agree.
that's
We
good.
can reword that to make it make
Yes,
sense.
That's a good idea.
Because going back to
Incorporate
Chair
it,
White,
yeah.
the rubric is based on those.
Mhm.
So, but we can also place this on the bike rack for next year. So every year, we go through refinements, because we learn every time we go through this process.
How long has, I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead, you go ahead.
I was just gonna ask how long this program has existed.
I think our first neighborhood sustainability grant was in 2012. We had $5,000, and this year we have 75. So, yeah, it's grown. Yeah, significantly. So, as you can imagine, so have the application and the requirements and expectations.
One question, and this might have been this is probably something I should have caught a few weeks ago. The third objective, under food objectives, increase pollinator habitat. I'm just thinking to get full points for the objective objective category. I think the project has to meet all three of those. And I can think of a lot of very worthwhile food related projects that don't really have anything to do with increasing pollinator habitat. I'm thinking, for example, of the one that Flagstaff Liminal Space put together a year or two ago. I don't know if it might not be worth the effort to revisit if we want to change that objective to something else. We could even just change that objective to one about educating about, about food-related sustainability or some such. What do y'all think?
Tia was saying you only have to have 2 of them, not 3.
You have to have 3 to get the highest score.
Yeah, and I guess that does put it against puts it at a disadvantage, other ones that might be structured specifically where like, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Well, I also wonder, I love pollinators. I got my master's degree in pollination restoration. But how, is Flagstaff's food system really pollinator limited? Like, how big of an issue is pollinators? I mean, look out in the forest right now, the scarlet key is incredible.
Well, we have, not our current mayor, the previous mayor, 2 mayors ago, goodness, committed the city of Flagstaff to the mayor's monarch pledge, which incorporates a lot of elements that you see here associated with pollinators. So we're also trying to utilize the neighborhood sustainability grants as a conduit to achieve the goals that have been established in the mayor's monarch pledge. So pollinators are a really big element of that.
It's a really big discussion in my neighborhood, actually. We're all talking about pollination.
Yeah.
It is kind of big.
So this, ultimately, if it's a really strong project otherwise, then the point off in that respect might not be that big of a deal for it. But I don't know, it's probably not worth, we're running out of time, and this probably isn't worth the time at the moment, so let's move on for now. Thank you, Tia.
So you
No,
added
I mean,
and/or
I
education efforts.
appreciate you bringing that up and I will, work to incorporate that.
Can we change in that first bullet point, instead of including community gardens and backyard livestock, we put for example? Because I don't want people to think that their project has to include community gardens and backyard livestock.
Well, and it's in the project ideas, so I think we can even
Just take it out.
Yeah.
Just take it.
Yeah, I think we can take that out. Good point.
Like the simpler the objectives are, the less complicated interpretation gets, yeah.
Tia, can you kind of speak? I know this is important, but can you sort of speed run the rest of it as much as possible, because we are kind of, again, running out of time.
I'll make sure every other one, maybe the building energy one doesn't have the word explicit because that was another one that Jenny helped me update.
Yeah, and I think with promote, we can work on, because it just said promote energy conservation. Yeah.
Well, and if there's anything anyone really wants, can they just email you and maybe copy everybody? And it seems like
Can't
there's
copy everybody.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Can't copy. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's
there's,
right.
yeah,
meeting law.
but you
Can
can
they just email?
you can reach out to
put
Tia.
out the next one,
I'll
yeah.
reply.
Oh, you're right, I forgot, I'm sorry.
Oh, we'll remind you.
All
We'll remind you.
Previously, we didn't have any alternatives to SurveyMonkey listed.
You say Survey Monkey?
Yes, it is a online survey
That's right.
application. And I'm okay accepting and working with applicants to submit through alternative methods. Update here is we're just doing one workshop and then are gonna do 3 different kind of office hours. Commissioner Kunkel is helping with some office hours on September 19th. Definitely still open to other volunteers. Yeah.
Are there any other okay, sorry, go on.
Nope, that's it.
All right,
All the stickies, yeah.
Any discussion on, any further discussion on any of the changes that have been made?
I had 2 very minor changes in the SurveyMonkey. So
Oh.
the document that was is that,
The application.
yeah, the application
Just the
itself.
Word doc, yeah.
Question 12. Sorry, I need to make my notes and then I have this thing. Question 12 was the describe the project and its goals, include appropriate detail about how it aligns with the vision of the Sustainability Commission, et cetera. And then the next question down is about the overarching goals. And I think in my head, I feel like that wording is just a little confusing because we're using goals and then we're using goals again in a different way. And I'm wondering if we could change that prompt to say, describe the project and the impact it will have on the Flagstaff community versus and its goals, because then we have to talk about the goals in the next question. I also was hoping to better align with the rationale in our evaluation rubric in the project narrative, if we could then include a statement or evidence for why the project is needed. Because we specifically score them on, do they provide evidence that the project is needed, but we don't ask them that anywhere in the application.
Really good catch.
And
I wrote a little note, I can send it to you if you'd rather.
Oh, we don't have a question about project rationale?
I think it can go in the narrative, I think that's fine.
And to be clear, all applicants will also have access to the scoring rubric, so they,
Yeah, it's just nice to like prompt them, and then we don't have to downgrade them when they would have had an answer.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know what changed between last year's.
And then in question 14, the very last sentence, we say something about goals, and that needs to be changed to objectives to keep with the same language for the question.
Okay. Which one?
Question 14, the very last word should, instead of goals, should be objectives.
Because question 14 is about objectives.
Thanks for putting in all the work to make these updates.
Yes, it was a lot more than I expected.
yeah, thank you. All right, any further discussion while Tia's typing, or is there any further discussion on the current topic? All right, do we have a motion to use the, do we have a motion to use the application and rubric as modified?
I'll motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Conkle. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Sorry, I'm still memorizing names. We have a second from Commissioner Walkowinski, is that right? Okay. Any discussion on the current motion? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. The motion passes. All right, thank you, everyone. And again, especially thank you to Tia for taking the time to make those edits. Does anybody object if we table the vice chair election until next month?
I move to table the vice chair until next month.
Okay.
Second it?
I don't think we need to vote on that, but
Well, if you're gonna do it on everything else, why not that one?
all right, so we have just enough time. So adopt an avenue. So a lot of you probably know there is a program that the city of Flagstaff runs where, the sustainability division of the runs, where different organizations and groups can adopt different streets. And basically as part of that, they will, said group will periodically just go down the street and pick up litter and make sure everything looks nice. It's been about a year, so the Sustainability Commission officially right now has adopted Aspen, I believe it's Aspen Avenue, the street right in front of City Hall, between City Hall and the library.
All of Aspen?
No.
It's basically, yeah, just from this block here up to Verde. Is that 5 blocks, 4 blocks?
But it's the ones down the street, so we're picking up garbage in the street where people have dropped it on the sidewalk, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And it's been about a year now since we've last done a trash pickup on that street. I do remember, and it would be good to keep doing it every year if this is something that we continue to do. This doesn't have to be something, to be clear, this doesn't have to be something that the Sustainability Commission does, although I think the optics of it are very good. And, you know, it is a nice opportunity to kind of meet once in a while and just chat and get to know your fellow commissioners a little better. Now, one other option is that Flagstaff does have a few other adopt a noun programs in place. We have also adopt a stream, and Nicole, you'll have to remind me of the other one. Adapt a foots, thank you. And so we could also choose to adopt a stream or adopt a foots and do that going forward. Again, if this is not something that's a priority for the commission, I think it's worthwhile, but I don't believe there's any rule that says that we have to be involved in having something in particular adopted. But again, I think it's good optics for us to do so. I guess there's, again, this might be something we'll have to table for next month too, because we are rapidly running out of time. But we basically will have 2 agenda items with this, which A, do we want to continue adopting an avenue? B, if not, do we want to adopt a foots or a stream instead? And C, if we decide to continue having adopted any of these things, it would be good for us to schedule a time to do that. I was hoping to schedule a time for the next month or so, so that we could still do it while we have just a little bit of a vestige of summer left. But there is also something we said for that brisk autumn air. So yeah, I'm okay tabling this to next month, given how time limited we are. Is there any discussion on that requires less than about 2 minutes?
I just have a question about adopting any one of those things. Is there a fee involved in that, or is it just your volunteer time to
Yeah, just volunteer
take
time.
care of it?
Yeah, we provide all the like safety jackets and litter pickers and buckets and gloves, all the fun accoutrements that go with picking up litter. So yeah.
Well, I think beyond the optics, I think it's called walking your walk and talking your dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is that too.
Doing the right thing.
All right, so that's another agenda item that we will have to do next month. Tia, we did skip the sustainability division updates. Did you, or would you be willing to send a summary of those to us via email?
I did.
Okay, that's-
They are connected to this new this is the second month of the new agenda format, so I know it's pretty new still. If you click this link to view agenda item, and then it's kind of linked in here is where the July 2023 Sustainability Division report is. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Tia.
Mhm.
So I would invite and encourage, if you haven't yet, then I would invite and encourage all Sustainability Commission members to take a look at that this month, and preferably every month, but especially this month since we didn't get to it on the agenda. And again, thank you for your flexibility with that, Tia.
Thank you.
Next is to and from. So for this agenda item, it's basically if anybody has anything that they would basically just like to announce to the group, this can be preferably sustainability commission related, at least tangentially sustainability related, but it doesn't have to be. If there's events coming up that you just like us to know about, if there's achievements that you or your organizations have done that you would like to brag about, stuff like that you just kind of want to announce. Does anybody have any to and from?
I have a couple really quick. Just Flagstaff Food Link, which is one of our previous grant recipients, sent us a couple upcoming events. One on September 23rd, Harvest Festival and Indigenous Farmers Market at Colton Garden. And then even sooner, a seed saving workshop on the 9th.
Is that linked in the agenda?
Okay.
Oh, wow, it's led
No,
by
it's-
Bill
Where are
McDormand
those-
and
where can
Kate.
we find
Go
Kristen
to
and
that
I'll
if you're
send
interested
it
in
out.
seed saving. Bill's amazing.
It's on the agenda in the email that we were sent.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's
No,
not?
no,
Okay,
it's
fine.
it's
in
on
the
the
to
city
and from
council
because
website.
it's not a.
Is it on your website? Can I go to, is it on your
I'll
website?
send you all an email with it.
Okay, my apologies for assuming. Thank you, Tia.
Yeah.
And again, thank you for those announcements and events. Is there any other to and from?
Yeah, I already expressed gratitude for our two commissioners who are volunteering to help spread the word about our flood-proofing grants. I just want to say that we are being very strategic in those grants and how we are moving them forward. We actually have flood data. So we know our community members that are at highest risk. And so that is actually how we are targeting. The grants are open to everyone in the community, but we are putting a concerted effort in getting that information out to people who are in direct flood areas. So if you know of anyone, we'll also make sure you have via email the flood proofing grants. These are one-time dollars that we fought really hard to get. So we have about just a little over 200,000 to get out into the community. And we are applying for more through the state and through a couple of other different grant opportunities. But
So for clarification, there's sections of the community that are described as floodplains that they're gonna get, that we have grant.
we're actually using data from the post-fire flooding.
Okay,
And we are looking, we know
you have targeted areas, that's.
we have targeted areas.
So you have an effort to go to those particular homes, put something on there.
And put the door hangers on.
Okay.
The grants are available to the entire community, but they are weighted on need.
Is there a specific weekend you're doing this? Is there some time that?
This weekend, and if you do have interest, we can follow up with you.
But I'm not gonna be this weekend, so.
There'll be more opportunities, hopefully.
I'm sure.
We're doing 2 waves. That's kind of a poor choice of water. No, okay. We're opening it up twice. So we're doing the first run right now, and then we're gonna issue and open up another kind of window for
Okay.
people to apply. So we don't want it just to be an all at once. So we're hoping that this first wave, people actually start sharing the information with neighbors so we can hopefully get additional participation.
Is the information on the website, so, because I have a friend that lives just outside of the area, I'm gonna be hanging right on Stevana, and they've just,
Absolutely, it's on the website, and applications will be reviewed. We have an equity kind of panel that will be reviewing applications. So it's through that lens of equity that we are approaching this first and foremost.
And the idea is that the people will be given encouragement to do things that will prevent flooding. It's not like, because you're in a flood area, here, get some money and maybe buy a new stove. It's gonna be, put a rock wall up in the back area, do some mitigation so that flooding will affect you.
Like flood doors, you know, a lot, and even like emergency flood barriers that can be blown up. Yeah, so it was a hard lift to get this across the finish line. It took like 18 months.
Wow.
A lot of legal elements there. So we're really excited to get it launched.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nicole. Any other to and from? All right, I know we're a couple minutes over. So real quick, next is future agenda item requests. Now again, for the folks who are new to the Sustainability Commission, if you have requests for future items to go on our agenda, then this is the best time to let us know. If you email either Tia or myself, then we can still take those emails, we can still put items on the agenda. But in the interest of everything being out of the open, it is best practice to bring those to bring agenda items that you want to bring up, that you want discussed right here and during this section, rather than emailing us, because then it gets noted in the meeting minutes. So that said, are there any requests for future agenda items? I do have one, and I'm not sure exactly which branch of the city that we would bring in, or if we would need to bring anyone, but which branch of the city we'd need to bring in. Probably possibly emergency services or emergency planning, but both some certain recent national events and also some conversations with friends have reminded me that it'd be good to have a discussion about climate change related emergency preparedness in Flagstaff over the next couple of years. Specifically, what does our plan look if we have to evacuate either a large section of Flagstaff or the entire city? And B, the flip side of that is if there is some sort of emergency, either a heat emergency or something else similar, where we get 100,000 to 300,000 refugees from elsewhere in Arizona, are we prepared to deal with an event like that? So I think that that's an important, sorry, Nicole, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely, and we can talk about it, but by law, emergency management is managed by the county.
Okay.
But we have started an emergency management program within the city, so, but it's not gonna operate at that level, so it would have to be the county that was brought in for that.
Okay, that is very good to know. And
I think the answer is no in what they're planning, so we're trying to work with them.
Okay.
It'd be great.
Yeah, so all the more important to bring that up then. And yeah, I don't know what the law looks at. I guess be mostly a Stacy issue. I suspect that there's at least a few loopholes that we could figure out to like have some plan in place if there's a major refugee event, for example. But that is all really good stuff to know. But either way, I think it would be an important conversation to have in this committee at some point.
It's interesting, I might add one, just first, what is the risk, the perceived risk, like, do we know for emergencies? And then two, what are we doing about it?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, since we're on the top of the mountain, people coming up here from Phoenix to escape something is unlikely, but possibly people coming from Williams or Winslow.
These are all really, yeah, absolutely. And I think what would be beneficial, we'll put it on, we're about to get out of here.
You're fine. I was just gonna say that I'm gonna leave the door open that says exit,
Okay,
and all the rest of the doors are locked.
thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Yeah, have a
Thanks,
good night.
Kyle. Appreciate
You
you.
guys can stay, it's fine. I have to go, so.
Yeah, you've been here all day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, we can work on getting that coordinated. I think it would be beneficial we start a list of questions to provide to them, and so when they come, they can be prepared, because I don't think this is, they're just really starting to embrace this discussion. So I think that'd be great. This will be a really good conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Commissioner McCormick. Is there any other requests for future agenda items? All right, well, Thank you for your patience, everyone. This is, believe it or not, the first time since I've been chair that the meeting has gone late.
So you don't want to have, make a motion to finish the meeting?
I
End the meeting?
don't have to, it turns out. This meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you everyone again for your time, your skills, your presence, and I will see you all next month, if not sooner, I hope.
Thank you, Priscilla.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you as well.